Hey, Robert.
Hey, you're on. So we
So,
were talking about crypto, and then we were like, we
yeah,
should be recording this because posterity is just people are going to look back at 2022 and it'll be the year that crypto imploded.
it really is. And we've done a number of shows on this, but there is one of the characteristics of crypto, and I think it was also a characteristic of the dot-com bubble, and the period in between is this phenomenon in Silicon Valley of very young people who don't have that much experience at living suddenly making a lot of money, and not just a lot of money, but being admired and respected and becoming these gurus at a very, very young age when it's not clear that they have the maturity to handle it. And it looks like at FTC that was definitely FTX that was definitely part of the issue there.
It definitely does. And, you know, if you can remember being in your 20s, it's not shocking. No. But it's also, it really highlights how the process in Silicon Valley has evolved to minimize the impact of these issues. Because it is exact same thing. You've got people dropping out of college and starting the next generation of leading technology companies. But in Silicon Valley, the VCs are kind of the adults in the room. Although the VCs were in FTX, so I don't want to oversell that. But I think the big thing is that I don't want to undersell it either, because there is always a conversation of, is the original founder the right entrepreneur to continue running the company? The Google guys stepped aside. But more recently, founders are not stepping aside, and it goes well when it goes well, and then it goes badly when you become Meta. And it allows the you to have the CEOs, the early CEOs, step aside and then maybe even come back. I mean, the Google guys came back and ran Google. But the biggest thing I think is that the money isn't immediately accessible. I mean, that's the thing. And we've talked about with crypto is, investors have kind of an incentive to pump and dump because they can cash out immediately. Whereas VCs, they lock up their money. Could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, but they're in to build long-term value. A short-term bubble doesn't buy them anything. And we saw that in 2000 when people who on paper had funds that were turning 10x suddenly were losing money 2 years later. But in crypto, everybody can cash out, and that includes the founders. So, there's a good chance that if SBF had not been able to spend the kind of money that he spent, that it would have worked out much better for him. I mean, I'm sure at the time it seemed like heaven, but I'm sure it seems like hell now.
$112 million on real estate in the Bahamas, almost 8,000 square foot condo, I think at about $40 million.
If you had an unlimited checkbook, like unlimited budget, your credit card and the bills never came in. I'm
and
not
you're
shocked.
20 something years old, and you
never experienced everything coming home to roost.
No, it's really interesting to watch it happen. Kind of sad and interesting.
It is sad because we've talked about the potential, and this is definitely going to clear things out, but not in the way that would have been minimal pain and maximum benefit.
No, and a lot of these kids are super smart, and this is going to really, for some of them are going to land up in jail, and some of them it's going to dent their reputations for a long, long time. So that is too bad. But we will,
reputations and CEOs.
We were going to talk about Twitter, so which is now a private company owned by Elon Musk, and it cost him, $44 billion, of which I think 13 is debt, and I'm not sure how much of the rest how much of the rest is him, and how much of the rest is other billionaires who chipped in to help.
Let's just call it around 25 billion.
Probably, yes. But it's a lot of money by any standard, even by Elon Musk standards. He overpaid. We know he overpaid just because the bid was made in cash, not in variable stock, but in cash before the NASDAQ went down dramatically. So when Twitter stock went down, so we know he overpaid in that sense.
Too bad he didn't bid in FTT coin.
Yes, or in Dogecoin. I mean, he was big in Dogecoin.
Even Bitcoin.
Yeah, he was the one who made Dogecoin, right?
That's true.
He's got a number of different issues there. We'll talk about the kind of the cultural issues, the speech issues, but there's a simple financial issue. He's got to pay interest on $13 billion of debt. And the company is not exactly one of the more profitable companies. They were making a profit, but very small. And it's not clear what the upside is. This is Twitter. So he might have a vision for what he envisions upside, but upsides take time to develop. It takes, as we've talked about many times, experimentation, trial and error. Not clear he has the time to experiment.
Well, it's going to take something.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of starting small and with a low burn, although it seems like he's cutting the burn dramatically. But let's just take a step back and talk about LBOs, because
Yep.
you could call this an LBO. Now, the amount of equity and the amount of debt is reversed from a traditional LBO, but the amount
This
of
is leverage buyouts. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
When you take on leverage, and in an LBO, it's typically you would have maybe 2 or 3 times as much debt as you have equity. So it's the reverse. It's not as leveraged as you might traditionally have, but then Twitter doesn't have the kind of free cash flow that the normal LBO company would have. So when you do this, you're essentially taking a financial magnifying glass to what improvements you can bring to the company. If you do well, you make an extraordinary return because most of the money came from debt holders. They have a fixed interest rate. I don't know if here it's 13% or something. But if you're doing much better than that, we know technology companies can yield 30, 40% returns. You're capturing that spread on a multiple of your investment. The downside is, of course, it magnifies losses as well. So if things don't go well, you go bankrupt and your equity is wiped out. And that's the bad outcome end game with Twitter or any leverage buyout, is that they end up not being able to service the debt, not being willing to recapitalize the company, and the debt holders, who are currently investment banks, just praying they can get the debt off their books. The debt holders end up owning the company. And that is not, I am sure, the outcome that Elon Musk was focusing on or even envisioning when he bought the company.
No, and of course, Twitter is an unusual leverage buyout candidate because it doesn't have a lot of free cash flow. It's not very profitable. It's in the process of trying to figure out how to be profitable, but usually that happens pre a leverage buyout. That usually happens with equity. Equity is willing to take that kind of risk of figuring out how to be profitable. But here, Elon Musk has jumped in with leverage, and now he's trying to figure it out. And he's trying to move from a advertising model to a subscription model, or a combination of the two. And he doesn't have a lot of time to fail, which we talked a lot about with Ingenuism. One of the most important things is the ability to fail and to learn from failure. And here, one of the things leverage buyouts do, and they do it, when you read the literature, right? It's one of the reasons they do leverage buyouts, right? To constrain managers so that they're really focused on producing cash flow, not experimenting. It's a way to kind of get managers focused, not the other way around. Here, no, the manager has to be an experimenter and try to figure this out quickly.
Yeah, the typical model is there are obvious things that should be done. For some reason, they're not happening. So you need to bring in a new management team or have just new incentives to light a fire under the team. And then they do the things that are obvious. They work or they don't. I mean, they're obvious, but that doesn't mean they always work. And here it is. I mean, if you think about Tesla, if you think about SpaceX, they both had times in their histories where they were running out of money. And you change history a little bit, it's possible that one or both of them doesn't exist now. And so you go into Twitter with that same sort of mentality that we're walking close to the edge. But it's not as obvious what the milestones have to be, what the outcomes need to be in order for you to get to the good scenario. I mean, with Tesla, it's you need to start manufacturing cars with low defects and high performance at reasonable cost didn't really matter because they had a really nice profit margins. SpaceX, your rockets have to fly, they have to be able to land, but you're able to crash a few along the way. And here, it's not clear what that is. And while I think that under the current structure, you're absolutely right. The runway is short and getting shorter. It's not absolutely clear to me that that's the long-term structure, especially with the debt all on the
Mhm.
investment banks side. I mean, there are ways to create runway, even in traditional LBOs, where if it's a little more speculative, you might have the debt pay in kind for a while. So instead of getting cash interest, the amount of debt accrues, it's negative amortization. And that increases the potential losses for the debt holders. But if the current scenario, the current trajectory is immediate bankruptcy, and they end up owning Twitter with no idea what to do with it,
Yeah.
maybe they'd rather give Elon Musk some runway, take, some stretch out the debt somehow, maybe take some warrants. Financial engineering is pretty miraculous at making the worst case scenario less likely.
And my guess is because it's Elon Musk and because of his record of success and because the guy's brilliant, there's a good chance that is indeed what happened. And I wouldn't bet against him at Twitter. That is, in spite of everything we've said, he could still pull it out. He's done pretty amazing things in his career, and he's obviously quite a character. And but it is interesting to watch. And one of the differences between Twitter and most LBOs or most restructurings is, with Twitter, you get an inside look in real time. Elon Musk is tweeting as he's thinking about ideas. He's letting you know on Twitter, and which is also interesting because it's whether that communication is helpful or not is not clear, but it does make it more fun for us outsiders to watch what happens and see the consequences.
Yeah, we've got the Twitter soap opera running 24/7. But if you think about it, it's possible that this is what experimentation looks like at Twitter. I mean, with SpaceX, it's clear it's rockets, and you launch them and you learn if they crash or if they don't crash. With Tesla, it's the same thing. You learn both in manufacturing, you learn with the cars on the road, you're getting feedback. They're very structured for obvious positive feedback through learning. What does that look like with Twitter? I mean, traditionally you would say, okay, you introduce new features and you see how people are using them and you evolve.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe you just tweet about features and see what the response is. If you can have your finger on the pulse of your customers without having to spend any money, that could be perfect experimentation. I don't know how reliable it is, but
I don't know either. I mean, he's doing polls, right? He did a poll. Should we reinstate Donald Trump? And it was, I think the yeses won at 52-48. So within 5 minutes, he had reinstated Donald Trump. I mean, the people have spoken. But then when people said, well, what about this other person? Why don't you reinstate him? Or why don't you have a poll? Musk would say, no, in a sense, I don't like him, so I'm not reinstating him. So it's fun to watch, but there's a certain whimsical, a little bit of a randomness to it. Maybe there's logic behind it that Elon understands and we don't, but there certainly seems to be a certain randomness to his decision making about some things.
Maybe the same thing was going on at SpaceX and Tesla the whole time. I mean, it wouldn't be shocking, but we have the same. I mean, Elon Musk is seasoned. He's successful. He's gone through rough times. He's like, I don't want to compare him to SBF.
No, not
and
at all.
You do have the same thing of, he is a golden boy. He just has long-term accomplishments to back it up.
Yeah.
But everybody gets overconfident. I mean, we've all experienced it, not just you and I, but everyone who's listening to this has experienced, a little success turning into, hey, this is easy. I can do no wrong. And that's sometimes when you stumble.
I talked about this on my show a while ago. You remember Chainsaw Al Dunlap, who was really, really good at restructuring companies. And then he wanted to have a swan song. He wanted to run a company like a real CEO. And
build a company.
Completely crashed and burned. And he ended his career, sadly, on that crash and burn instead of ending it on a high at what he's good at, what he was good at, but I don't think that was independent of the fact that he was hated for his, restructuring efforts, even though, we understand them as being good. So he tried to be the good guy to his, and Chainsaw did not function well as a good guy. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, the challenges around speech are significant. I mean, he's going to have to find what the moderation policy is, and he hasn't yet doing polls, I think, on who to ban and who not is probably not the long-term solution. But he's going to have to figure that one out, that it doesn't just depend on Elon Musk wanting this person or not wanting that person. And then the blue check mark, I got my blue check mark just in time before they canceled the program of, I paid the $8 and I got my blue check mark. I'm not sure it has any impact on anything, but he got my $8. But that's the revenue model. They want to get you to pay to have higher, I think, prominence on the platform or something like that. They're still working on it. And advertisers are leaving for political reasons. So it's a significant challenge, and it is interesting to watch on the sideline. I hope he's successful, because I actually enjoy Twitter. So and it is a valuable platform. So
well, it's kind of unique in that, yep, the other platforms are all trying to copy each other, and Twitter has carved out people have tried to copy what Twitter does, but maybe because there's no advertising revenue, they haven't tried very hard. But it's definitely, it feels more Wild West live, like actually interacting with people versus the curated Instagram, YouTube, Facebook experience. I don't know about TikTok.
I don't think either of us knows about TikTok.
Yeah, we'd have to interview a 17-year-old to know anything about TikTok. But I think that a lot of it's going to depend on, it's going to come down to, what does Elon Musk want to do with his time and his money? He could easily, I am sure he could easily buy out the debt now. And then, and by cutting costs, turn Twitter into a private company that it is positive cash flow, that sustaining, and never make any money off of it. And, that's a lot of money to throw, but aside, especially if you're trying to get to Mars. But that's one possible outcome. And the other, as sort of the other extreme is he decides Mars is more important, and the distraction and the money, and he just basically turns it over to the debt holders.
And he does have a vision for it that includes long form writing on Twitter, so you could attach your long form writing in productive ways, video, and a bunch of other things. He does have a vision for it to be a dominant social media focused in these kind of debates that Twitter's so good at, or so bad at, depending on your perspective. And I'm sure there are ways to monetize all that. And so it's a question of his patience, the patience of the debt holders, and how quickly people respond to good ideas when he presents them at Twitter. And everything, of course, now is politicized. So that's a sad part of it, that it's not just pure business. Everything is now from the framework of, is he on the right? Is he on the left? Does this help us? Does it hurt the other side? Which is unfortunate.
It's very unfortunate. I wish that, that Elon Musk's at one point, he was one of the least hated billionaires, because he was bringing space, he was saving the planet with electric cars, and his electric cars were the fastest cars on the road. Like, everybody had something to like about him. And unfortunately, that means also you can say everyone has something to dislike. And so that seems to have been how it swings. And not because I don't think it bothers him at all. I have no idea, but if I had to guess, I would take the under there. But because I think it'll impact, it's an impact on the world. When we think about Ingenuism and people being connected, implicit to that is that people are cooperating.
Yep.
And when you're connected and all it does is you're fighting, that's not Ingenuism, because you're not sharing ideas, you're not trying to collaborate and support each other and build something that you couldn't do on your own. You're really tearing each other down, and it's anti-Ingenuism. And
I think it inhibits even the people who want to share stuff, because they're afraid now, because they see the kind of response that some people are getting. So it's generally an anti-Ingenuism cultural phenomena. And Elon is not immune to it. I mean, he does not respond well to criticism on Twitter. It is interesting because, again, it's all in real time, but he tends to lash out like some of the worst people on Twitter. But So if he can transform the platform and turn it into a more collaborative, positive environment, I think social media has huge potential if somebody can figure out the right model for more collaborative, not just for sharing cat videos, but for actual collaboration. And so, for example, the FTX story, most of the new information about FTX came from citizen journalists on Twitter. So like they were breaking the news before the New York Times, before the Washington Post, before anybody. They got the scoop. And that kind of collaborative effort that can bring in strangers, like we can easily collaborate between people we know. We can create a Teams group or something. There are lots of platforms to do that. But collaborating with people you don't know and getting feedback from people you don't know, that's the strength of social media. And that I don't think we've extracted the real upside there.
Yeah, I think we just scratched the surface, because
Yep.
if you think about the way people use social media, and this is not a diss at all on it,
Yep.
but it's primarily entertainment.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with entertainment, emotional connection. All of those things are extremely valuable and part of being human. And it's a little bit better than crypto being just about trading crypto, but
Yep.
it's a little bit of the same thing. As to build value, you need to think about, okay, where are the ideas? What's enabling people's ingenuity to create things that didn't exist before? What's enabling people to work together and create things that didn't exist before? And social media hasn't done a lot of that. And that's, I think, the super app. And maybe there's a crypto component to it, maybe there isn't, maybe there's a Twitter component to it, maybe there isn't. But that's what we here at Ingenuism are looking forward to. You have to take the steps. Nothing wrong with where we are now, but it's still well short of the potential.
And it could be that Elon Musk is just the right person to turn Twitter into exactly that. We'll have to wait and see.
I hope so. If it ends up being his most valuable company, we're all going to be in a really, really good position.
Absolutely. Great. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Yaron. Talk soon.